We can be found on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. Like, share, subscribe, and leave us a comment down below. Now, on with the show.
Okay. We'll do it live. Okay. Fucking thing. No. We'll do it live. Fuck it.
Death Holler is a horror cast created by two true horror fans to bring to the table your favorite horror films. Topics include, but are not limited to, historical horror, gore, the occult, and terror. Listener discretion is advised.
Okay, so for the Christmas season, I don't know how much horror things you've gotten into, but have you actually, besides researching things for the podcast, have you delved into anything else besides that?
I actually feel like I've been watching more horror during the Christmas season than I have during the Halloween season, if you believe that.
I can believe it because I feel like it's getting close at this point for myself, but what have you been watching?
Okay, so I've been watching Evil again, like we previously discussed.
Okay.
But the funny thing is, and wait, have you seen Evil?
No, I was going to start it the other day, but then I started watching a bunch of different movies and stuff for the holiday season and just never, including horror-themed Christmas things, and just never got into it.
Well, I'm not going to spoil anything regardless, but so there is this demon in Evil, and he is horrifically hilarious. So it's like both. He is horrifying and hilarious, both kind of at the same time. Really gets under your fucking skin. He's pretty cool. And so the other night, my husband was watching it, and I fell asleep. So lucky me, I got to dream, because I'm a dreamer. I got to dream about what he was watching, and it was not fun. I will tell you that much. So he's a little intimidating demon, so fuck you, George. I don't like you, but you're funny, too, at the same time. But as you and I have kind of discussed a little bit, there's a lot of fucking horrific, scary, dark history behind a lot of Christmas movies.
There is quite a bit. It's I don't know, it kind of, you wouldn't think the themes would go together, but they go together like, peanut butter and jelly, or, like Reese's peanut butter cups with chocolate and peanut butter. I mean, they go hand in hand, it seems like.
So yeah, you and I had discussed basically how The Nightmare Before Christmas was a really kind of a good introductory film to kind of get maybe the younger audience into starting to watch maybe scary movies.
It bridges the gap. I mean, it's childlike enough and, whimsical enough without playing too much in the dark, but it also has that dark element to, kind of ease them into it. It's a good starter film for sure.
Yeah. What films have you been watching this holiday season?
Well, I always have go-tos for the holiday season. Of course, Gremlins is at the top of the list. I mean,
oh my God, yes.
We'll get into it later in the discussion of this, actual show, but it's the perfect, just combination of the Christmassy elements or whatever, but mixed with the crazy, creatures and horror themes, and and it wraps up so many other Christmassy films inside of it. I mean, there's the name of the place in that movie is even based upon It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, it's just great. So, it's a riff on it, at least. It's not the same, but I watched that, and just last night I watched the original, I believe, Black Christmas. Not a great film, but it's interesting. I started watching the new one the other day. I just never completed it. I felt like it, at the beginning at least, it leaned a little bit too far into the SJW, woke stuff, and I'm hoping that it doesn't, go that direction for the rest of the movie, but that's kind of where I left it at.
I don't recall ever seeing, you mentioned this movie, Silent Night, Deadly Night. I'm not sure if I've seen that.
I've honestly never seen it myself, and that's probably, I mean, anybody who's listening to this, that's, like us, big horror fans, is probably shocked, but I mean, it's one that's on my list to watch. It's just, it never really appealed to me, just for the fact that it's, kind of one of those movies which, also plays in our discussion today. It's one of those, some crazy guy in a Santa Claus outfit, chasing people down and killing them. I don't know, there's just something about that never really struck me as like that intriguing, as far as the actual plot.
I feel like that's kind of the theme of Black Christmas.
It might be. The original Black Christmas, you don't even really see anybody for most of the film. It's a lot of sorority girls getting lewd phone calls from some creeper, and then they start getting killed by somebody off screen. It's kind of like, I watched it on The Last Drive-In, Joe Bob Briggs, and he even discussed it. It's like kind of the proto-slasher movie. It's like you don't really see who the killer is through most of it. It doesn't really go through the same slasher themes, even though there is a final girl in it, but I don't know, it's just a really odd movie. They tried to make it more mysterious than it needed to be, and I don't know, it didn't resonate with me as much as, I guess it does with some other fans.
Okay, see, I'm mistaking my movies. Black Christmas, yes, I've seen that one. But I have seen, and I know it's not Silent Night, Deadly Night, I have seen a Santa slasher film, and shame on me for not having the name of that film. But basically it was people at home. God, I swear I'm mixing Black Christmas and this one. But a bunch of people in a home, maybe even sorority, and there was a Santa just picking these people off. So, shame on me.
There's another film that he started. He actually had Joe Bob had. Last night, just he had a new holiday special for Christmas, and he started playing a movie that I've never seen before that he says is great, called A Christmas Evil, and that, I don't know if that's what you're talking about. I never really got in. I had to stop watching before I could really get into the movie, so I don't know if that kind of plays into what you're talking about.
You know what? I don't know. I'm checking right now. Let's see. God, maybe he had an axe. So that could be it. I want to confirm. I mean, obviously, I want to verify that before I just confirm and say, yes, that was it. But I've seen some Santa slashers. But moving on from that, we talked also about Christmas classic films that had horror elements to them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of films that in the Christmas holiday season that have little tinges of it that you don't really even think about. I mean, the one that comes to my mind all the time is the one from, A Christmas Vacation, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, where, obviously Clark comes out, he's getting ready to saw up the tree that he just, yanked up out of the forest, and he's got on the hockey mask, and he revs the engine up, on the
Looking
chainsaw.
like Jason Voorhees.
Yeah, and I mean, and just the way they framed it, it's dark at night. I mean, even the music around that scene, they're clearly playing into the horror element of that, that whole scene, and of course, they have to follow it up with a quick little bit of comedy, which I love, where it's like, I think it was next door neighbor's like, what are you going to do with that, Griswold? And he's like, bend over and I'll show you. It's like, I love that scene.
I love that film so much. It's one of my favorites. And then, tell me about this. I have never heard about the fan theory about the devil in Home Alone.
Oh, yeah. So there's a scene in the movie when Kevin's mom is trying to make her way back to Chicago, and she is at it's in the United States. She's at an airport, and there's no more bookings. She can't get anything, and she's like really freaking out. She has to make it back home to Kevin, and she makes this off ball. In the scene, they frame it to where John Candy's character is like in the distance. You can see him in the background. He's kind of one of the customers behind her, but she has this comment where she basically offhandedly says, I would sell my soul to the devil right now if I could make it back home to my son, or something similar to that. And all of a sudden he just walks right up and like, well, we got a way to get you there. Come on with us, and
shit. I never noticed that.
And it's so perfect when the fan theory on Reddit, whenever the poster described it, I mean, it fits. I think it's in Scranton, because he goes on to say that where that particular event occurred is actually a crossroads at the airport, and it's basically meaning that John Candy is a crossroads demon, and he basically takes her up on her offer, and just like the crossroad demon mythology. It turns out at the end of the movie, if she just waited, she would have never had to make the deal with the devil anyways, because the rest of the family shows up just minutes after she does. So the irony is she sold her soul for literally nothing, if you believe the theory.
Yeah, and isn't that how it usually goes?
That's exactly how it goes. So it just fits so well. I mean,
how do people have time for this stuff? I swear I never catch shit like this. I mean, it makes sense when I hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, I never once thought of it, but whenever you read it, you're just like, oh my God, that's perfect. I mean, I mean, in my headcanon now, it's sadly what happens in the movie. I mean, just having to add that, a little bit of a horror element to the movie, but it fits so perfectly.
Yeah, and it's such a fun, friendly family movie. You would never even consider. Most people wouldn't, excuse me, except for creepers like us. Now, I specifically waited to discuss this for the holiday season, movies that are kind of have a creepy element to them for the holiday season, and that is Christmas Carol.
Yeah, that movie in particular, or even the book. I mean, if you want to get right back to it, I mean, we'll get into the history of, obviously Krampus and some of that stuff later in the show, but that story is like one of the oldest horror-themed Christmas stories in existence, and nobody even considers it that now, because it's just so much in the public mind that they don't even think about it. I mean, it's like, there's three ghosts, whatever. Scrooge learns his lesson, but I mean, it's really dark whenever you look at the end of it, the theme that's going on, what actually happens in the movie. I mean, the things that, how the ghosts are portrayed, how they, especially, I mean, Jacob Marley himself, I mean, a lot of people are like, why has he got that? Some of the older forms have him with this like bandage wrapped around his head, and it was like tied in a, knot on top. And they're like, why has he got that on there? That's so, that's so dumb. But if you go back to it, back in Victorian times, he actually, they did that to keep the jaws from going slack on the corpses when they were buried. So basically that shows that he is in fact dead, and he's returned from the grave, and he's still got the knot tied around his head to hold his, keep his chin from basically lolling out. So there's a lot of dark stuff in that.
Well, and the funny thing is, in terms of, and I'm going to bring up Jim Carrey one, so probably the most recent Christmas Carol, is nobody ever talks about how creepy that film is. I have not seen one person ever say, hey, this movie's creepy. But you'll get people that'll be like, oh, Nightmare Before Christmas, that's a little scary. I don't let my kids watch that. Coraline is real creepy. I don't let my kids watch that. And I'm like, have you seen this movie? I mean, my kids love it. And if my kids love it, it's creepy. So that is what's happening in this house. If the kids love it, it's creepy. There's something scary. There's violence happening. I'm sorry, that's just who I am. But yeah, Christmas Carol, nobody ever talks about how fucking creepy the ghosts were in that film. It was so well done. I love that film.
Well, and the thing is too, is that, I mean, I think the reason is because it's been diluted over time. I mean, you've got like the different versions of it, which we'll get into in another season, but I mean, you've got the the Muppet version, you've got the Disney version that's got Scrooge McDuck in it. I mean, it's and they're all watered down to the point that it kind of belays that a little bit. The only one in modern history besides the one you're talking about, or the recent history that I can think of that actually leans into the horror element, and it's a movie I love and one that I've watched recently, going back into movies that I've seen, is Scrooge, the one with Bill Murray back from the 80s. And I mean, they really, really lean into the horror element, especially later. I mean, first of all, when, his former boss shows up, and how they play the whole, he's, returned from the dead element, because he's basically a zombie. and with flaking skin and all that stuff. But then later in the movie, when the ghost of Christmas Future comes in, he's got literal souls like trapped inside of his robe. I mean, they really lean hard in that movie, especially with the Elfman score, Danny Elfman, going back in the Nightmare Before Christmas and all that. Elfman, lent this great score to the movie that added to the creep factor, and I think it went back more to the roots of the story about how it's supposed to be a little bit creepier, a little bit more, somber feel than just this, feel happy movie or whatever. So,
yep, for sure.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
And with that discussion, I think it's time to get into the meat of what we're here to discuss. This is Death Holler, Episode 3, Krampus. Of course, I am your host, the Reverend Dr. Death. Joining me via Spirit Box, you've already heard, is LlaReyna, discussing Christmas horror at its best. And I figure before we really get into the bulk of this Krampus discussion that we should bring up a film that I saw recently that's Krampus based, but not quite what I would consider the same quality as the one that we're going to discuss later in the podcast. So if it's all right with you, LlaReyna, I think I'll get into Attack of the Bees real quick.
What is that? What is that? What is it? Oh, no, not the bees! Not the bees! Ah! Open my eyes!
So for this episode or this particular version of Attack of the Bees, I would watched a movie recently called Sleigh Bells. It was released in 2018, and it's a very, very independently made movie. You can tell from the onset, just the way it's filmed, just the general vibe of the movie. Anytime you discuss, apparently any movie that you look at that's Krampus-based that is not the Krampus from 2015, directed by Michael Dougherty, that we're going to get into later. If you're watching any of those movies, it's basically like you're playing Russian roulette with a loaded gun. You're gonna guaranteed to get something that's pretty terrible, apparently. So this movie has several actresses I've never heard of before, and then a couple of bigger name people. I mean, but who we have in this movie, we have Hannah Wagner, also known on the internet as Hannah Minx. She plays a character named Sadie. She's a former YouTube cosplayer / Japanese culture fan. That was her previous experience with anything before doing this and a few other independent horror movies back in 2012. A little bit of interesting trivia about her. She happens to be from Appalachia, or close enough to it. She's from Lexington, Kentucky, which I thought was interesting.
Okay.
We have Christina Klebe, who plays Alexi in the movie. She's been in several different independent horror movies. The one that I know her most from is Tales of Halloween, which is a really good anthology movie, independent anthology movie for Halloween. She was also a character in Rob Zombie's Halloween.
Nice.
And apparently she was apparently also an actress in the new Hellboy movie, which I have not seen and kind of refuse to see because I feel like Ron Perlman did the most perfect version of that character, and I just don't see any point in watching the remake.
Wait, is the new one the guy that is in Stranger Things?
Stranger Things.
Yeah, I kind of want to see it because of him, because I do like, I mean, yes, Ron Perlman will always be the ultimate Hellboy, but you got to admit that actor from Stranger Things is a pretty decent actor.
I love him as an actor. The only thing is that I just feel like the way they promoted it, he just looks really weird. And I mean, it's the character, because he just, I don't know, it just looked like maybe it fit the comics better. I mean, I never really read the comics extensively. I mean, they were a lot just random images with a few words here and there, so they never really appealed to me that much. But I don't know, he just seemed too lean in the way they portrayed him, which is funny because he's a heavier guy in Stranger Things. So I don't know, it was kind of weird, but.
Interesting, yeah. And by the way, we are talking about David Harbour.
Yes,
that's his name.
David Harbour. The next actress that's billed as one of the three leads in this movie is Susan Slaughter. She plays a character, Dahlia, and it's kind of a weird one. She was actually, I guess, a cast member of Ghost Hunters International and Ghost Hunters. I don't know if you ever saw those reality TV shows.
Yes, I used to love those.
Yeah, so she was she was involved with those prior to going and doing some independent horror films. So it's kind of interesting to see that she, is in this. Of the bigger names that we have in the movie, we have Barry Bostwick playing Santa in this movie. And he's, for horror fans, he's most notably the guy who played the male lead in Rocky Horror Picture Show. He also played, I guess it was the mayor in the show Spin City opposite Michael J. Fox. And he was also in Tales of Halloween playing a really, really fun character, basically a version of Abaddon, who causes a lot of... takes this little boy under his wing in that little part of the anthology and basically creates this this little demon child, basically, because he just encourages the kid to go around and cause as much mayhem as possible on Halloween night. And I mean, it just gets worse and worse. Like, it just ramps up from, like, just the traditional things like bottle rockets or something, low grade, to pure out murder at the end of it. And he's just gleeful that he's watching this mayhem, from this innocent that he's corrupted through the whole thing. It's an interesting part of the anthology of that. But
That's so sweet.
we have Diane Salinger playing a character named Cherry in this. She's known for Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and and she also plays in the updated Paul Rubens Netflix special, Pee-wee's Big Holiday. So she kind of came back for the the big grand finale for Pee-wee, I guess.
Interesting.
We have a actor I've never heard of, Joel Hebner, playing Officer Anderson. It's a really bit part in the movie, and I don't know, I'll get into that in a second. And rounding out the main actors in the movie is Richard Mall, who I really shouldn't even list because he's not in the movie, but I have to list personally because he, even though he plays this character named Officer Green, which you'd never know because it's just like this little intercut, like maybe 5 minutes for the whole movie, but Richard Mall is primarily known on Night Court as playing the bailiff Bull, the big bald-headed guy that just went around, manhandling people, and he's a great comedic actor, but they really don't use him at all in this movie. So
I remember him, yes.
The basic plot of this movie is the three main leads, the three actresses, they play these girls that are part of a YouTube channel called The Adventure Girls. And basically they go around doing urban exploring, going into areas that are abandoned and, kind of just goofing off inside of them, doing petty theft. If there's anything cool in the area, they'll take it, it's like a souvenir of their, little adventure. And generally posting selfies and dry humping random objects, apparently, according to the movie, while loud techno music plays in the background. So that is what it is.
So they're dry humping to the beat, is what you're saying.
Yeah, well, at least the Hannah, Wagner's character is Sadie. They even the other characters are like, oh my God, she's at it again, and she's just, she's just dry humping anything in sight for whatever reason. I don't know, but
I'm sure that will play in much later in the film.
It does in a bad way, but so they decide that they're going to investigate an abandoned Santa-themed amusement park, and
sounds like a terrible fucking idea.
Yeah, it doesn't work out for them because, which is playing into the fact that they are kind of petty thieves and do a little bit of klepto. They mess around in the little workshop area of the amusement park after doing their dry humping, dancing to techno, and all that sort of thing. And having the obligatory scenes where they have to, out in the middle of nowhere, just change clothes into these very revealing outfits. Susan Slaughter being one of the only ones in the film to actually get semi-nude and shows her breast to everybody after they have a big scene where they all, get ready to do their thing in skimpy Christmas-themed outfits. They go into this workshop and they basically mess around and accidentally release Krampus from one of the items inside of the workshop. And he basically runs off and starts killing people. And this pisses off the person who's been monitoring the park, which is a white trash biker who claims he is Santa Claus. And it's Barry Bostwick, and he's got the do-rag on, he's got the I can't remember what he's got on the back of it, but he's got like on the back of his biker jacket, he's like part of a gang, and it's Christmas themed. It's like, Hell's Rains, or I don't know. It's like something like that. It's Christmas themed. But anyways, he tells the girls that they've released Krampus, and now it's up to him, they're always fighting each other. It's up to him to be able to, resolve the situation, but he needs their help. And of course, they don't believe him. So to prove that, he whips out his cane, take that as how you will, and transforms.
Oh, God.
It's actually a cane, but
Okay.
and he transforms into the more traditional Santa look, and that semi-convinces the girls because, there's the little cheesy independent films, magical like effects or whatever that kind of surround this little transformation. But anyways, from there on in the movie, it's just a lot. There's a few officers in the town. They're investigating the crimes. They have these scenes that are just dead in the water. They're supposed to be comedic. They're not funny at all. They kind of take away from any kind of fun momentum that the scenes with Santa and the girls kind of build up. But you've got them kind of investigating. You've got the girls and Santa trying their best to come up with a way to fight Krampus, because the general conceit in this movie is that Krampus and Santa are tied to each other, not just in mythology, but also physically somehow. Like if you hurt Santa, you hurt Krampus, and vice versa. So they can't kill Krampus without killing Santa Claus. So it's a lot of running around. It's got one of the problems I have with a lot of independent horror films, where you have a lot of meandering scenes where people are running around. They'll do something. It doesn't really do anything to further anything in the movie plot wise, or to actually take care of the threat. They run to another scene, kind of the Scooby-Doo effect, I guess you want to call it that. Just a bunch of people running around in circles, not really accomplishing anything. And they do that for a while, and eventually, at the end of the movie, they make the ultimate decision, and it goes from there. Not to spoil it for anybody that wants to watch it, but, they have to come to a conclusion about how to deal with this. The things that are good about the movie is they actually, for an independent film, they actually have a decent design for Krampus. They made him very bestial. He looks like a combination of a goat and a yeti. It's kind of a weird thing. He's not really human-like in any way, shape, or form. It's just kind of like, he's like this hairy creature that got goat legs and that sort of thing. I think it's interesting, the lore they came up with, that Santa and Krampus are so tied together that, they basically exist because of each other. I think that's kind of neat.
Yeah, I dig that.
But the things that are bad about the film, just pretty much everything else about it. Like I said, you got the incoherent plot, running in circles. You got the added shaky cam effect just to, feel like you're really in the thick of things, and all it does is kind of make you feel nauseous. You're like, what am I even looking at this point? Oh, that might be somebody's, that might be one of the girls' butts, or whatever. So there is loads of obnoxious techno in the movie. It just scene after scene of just like loud techno music. So if you like that, I guess that's your thing. Good on you. Some people might go to this looking for, for the cheesecake shot. Which they've got plenty, and they're gratuitous about. There's boobs in your face, butts being shaken. It's one of those films. They hired the three leads for a reason, and they're fairly attractive women. So, they try to put them out there for everybody to see, and that's pretty much what you got with it. Like I said, Richard Mall was pointless in the movie. I don't even know why he agreed to do this, but looking on the IMDb for him, the poor guy's just degenerated from like those days of Night Court, and basically this is what he sort of does now. So whatever, I guess that's his bag.
Whatever pays the bills, I guess.
I guess you get to a point and you have to take the work. But as far as the rating goes, I'm going to give this on the Nicolas Cage scale a gone in 60 seconds. It's ultimately a forgettable film, despite some talented cast members, in the movie, and the promise of a sex appeal. You can get, if you're going to this for the cheesecake stuff, you're better off, watching Cinemax at night, or even going to Pornhub. Just don't waste your time with this. I do have one thing though to discuss, which is more interesting than the movie itself, and it's the fact that, and cue the Unsolved Mysteries, music. I have this, I found out during one of my research of this that Hannah Minks / Hannah Wagner disappeared right after filming this movie. It was actually filmed in like 2012 or 2013. I don't know why it took 5-6 years to come out. But she disappeared right after this and didn't even show up to the New Year's Eve party with her other castmates. Nobody involved in the movie or the horror film community in general, the indie horror film community, has heard anything about her in the time since this, was filmed. The internet's put forth the theory that she could have been killed. That's one of the darker theories about it. There's others out there that think, oh, well, that's all, that's hyperbolic. She, the simple answer is she got married, had kids, and decided she didn't want to, she wanted to distance herself from all of this, that she did before. But nobody knows. She just disappeared, and if you look on her IMDb, she has done nothing since when it comes to anything like this.
Interesting. It does say she got married in 2014, but really not much after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like she dropped off the face of the planet after that. But I mean, if she's got a better life and, outside all this, more power to her. It's just an interesting thing that came up after researching this a little bit. The last thing I'll say about the movie is I really dig the cover they have to it on Amazon Prime. It's kind of sad that they put, that they got such a good cover for it on there, and the movie is what it is. But that's Sleigh Bells. Anybody wants to watch it, more power to you, but I don't recommend it. Next up, we just got a quick news segment before we get into the discussion about Krampus.
We didn't even want to do news. We didn't really think we had much.
No, didn't want to do...
But then this happened.
Yeah, we didn't want to do news at all because we wanted to get right into the meat of the discussion about this, or about Krampus, but then this news came out, and how can you not discuss this? This is awesome. The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix, sadly, is coming to an end. I think it's December 31st. And the final part 4 of the show, you can't really call it a season because they've taken seasons and broken them up, but part 4 will be the final part of the show, is going to introduce the Coven battling the Eldritch Horrors, which they've been leading up to this, if you've watched the show at all, and I can't wait for this. I really hope they lean into the Cthulhu, H.P. Lovecraft mythos when they do this, because they've hinted at it, and I just think it'll be awesome if they do.
Yeah, definitely.
They've said that each episode of the 8 will be them fighting a new threat, so each episode, the way that it's reading, is going to be devoted to its own Eldritch Horror that they're going to have to battle. And some late-breaking news doesn't really relate to that, but it's kind of odd, is that Caroline Rhea and Beth Broderick, who played Aunt Hilda and Zelda and Sabrina the Teenage Witch on ABC and CW, are going to return in episode 4 of this last part to play Aunt Hilda and Zelda. I don't know how that's going to work unless they're... maybe alternate realities are going to be mixed into this.
I was just going to say, an alternate universe maybe of some sorts?
That's what they're hinting at. It has to be. I mean, because they said that they're not playing different characters. They are playing Aunt Hilda and Zelda. I'm just wondering, they never said that they're getting Melissa Joan Hart to come back, but that would be kind of cool if there's at least some nod to that. I mean,
Yeah, that would be, I wouldn't be upset. It sounds a little cheesy because if you remember how cheesy the original Sabrina was.
It was very cheesy.
But people enjoyed it. You know what? I just have one request. Can we fucking get Salem to talk, please?
Before the show,
that's all I want.
Before the show ends, I think they need to harken back, because I think, I don't recall, maybe I missed it, but they have not hinted at like his demonic nature or anything about him since the very first season, if you want to, or very first part of this. I mean, do you remember anything about him otherwise coming up since the show began?
He saved Sabrina's ass a few times.
He has, but I mean, like I think if I remember right, on like the very first part, like they showed this shadow of like what he kind of looks like, and it would be very cool if they,
and you heard the whisper, and you're like, what the fuck is that? I was not expecting it to be Salem.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So I don't know. I know a lot of people have talked about, hey, can we get Salem to talk? And I know they're probably not interested in that. I do like how they play Salem in the background, where you haven't seen Salem for fucking episodes, and all of a sudden something happens, and here comes Salem, and you're like, oh, thank God. 1, the cat's still alive. 2, he's going to save her ass.
Yeah, he's kind of the Deus Ex Machina in some of these episodes, just to kind of, bring her back from the brink.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. Before they even mentioned Aunt Hilda and Zelda, meaning the originals, Carolyn Ray and Beth Broderick, before they even mentioned them, I was already excited. I'm really sad that it's coming to an end. I don't know why Netflix likes to do that. They don't keep them for very long, but man, it's such a fucking good show.
It is. It's a show that's a lot better than it should be, given the. I mean, if you go back. And I hate saying this because there are elements of the first season. I mean, I'll probably catch flack for this from some people, but Riverdale, in its very first short season, there was hints there that of a really, really good, like, Twin Peaks-esque show that was kind of going on. They kind of lean into the horror elements just a little bit. There was an episode in the second season, the Halloween episode, that was... I loved it because it even hinted at, like, zombies in Greendale, which is where Sabrina's from. And they just rolled all that over in the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, and just kind of, and I don't know, I've kind of fallen off of Riverdale because of it, because it just went more into teen drama. But there was those elements there that the creator of both shows, because he loves this stuff. I mean, in the comics, he has Afterlife with Archie, he has the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, all these dark themes, and he does them so well. And and they've really translated well into this show on Netflix, and I hate to see it end.
Yeah, and the one thing I love about this show, of everything, it is so fucking dark.
Oh yeah, I mean they delve into things. I mean, you wouldn't even imagine. Like, they're hinting at cannibalism, I think, in some of the earlier episodes, which the comics, granted, go into more detail with that stuff. But, I mean, I never expected to even see that in the show at all, and they kind of hint at it. So, I mean, it's...
Yeah. I started out letting my daughter watch this, and then I was like, yeah, maybe not right now. Maybe we shouldn't, and I'm thankful for that. Look, got to have stuff that I can enjoy too. My kids, they get to enjoy a lot, but this was a little bit much for her at her age, so we'll wait a little bit. I'm not that terrible of a mom.
I think it's one of those things where you need to let them age into it a little bit more. It's definitely not the ages they're at. It's not not things I would get into. I hope that some other network picks this up. I mean, I don't know if they will, but I would like to see somebody else. Obviously Disney's not going to. I mean, they have a hard time even doing anything darker on their own network at all. I think they're branching out now to some kind of thing where Disney Plus and some kind of other service are going to be together. I don't know. It's a weird thing that Disney's doing. God. And
if another network picks it up, that's great, but please not the CW.
No. If it goes to that, you might as well just say the show ended like this, which if they end it the right way, this might be enough. I don't want to say that, but I mean, if the show does a good enough job wrapping everything up, especially after introducing eldritch horror type things, I'm fine with it. I mean, you can't go much bigger than that anyways. I mean, that was one of the biggest aggravations I had with Supernatural, even hinting at the aspect of that being in the show, because that's like the ultimate bad. And then they never went with it. They never did anything else with it. And it's like, come on, don't tease us with this. Don't go into that and potentially give the idea that it's out there and just never do anything else with it. So,
yeah, for real.
One quick addendum I want to give to everybody that to the last episode, the Vivitch or the Witch, is that I don't know why this slipped my memory, because this ties in so much more in retrospect, I mean, than even some of the other stuff. The ergotamine derivatives that we have now that, are basically like these, they just take a portion of the fungus, like something it produces, and basically synthesize it. One of the things that's been made into in our, recent history is LSD. That fits in perfectly with everything we discussed like last episode. I mean, just, you couldn't pick a better substance to describe some of the things that happen in, puritanical, hysteria. So I think that, was just an omission that needed to be addressed. So,
see, this is why I was harking on you so much about this, saying, hey, look, I really agree with them saying that ergot was the reason. Well, obviously it definitely started it all, but man, yeah, they saw some funky ass shit. So it made sense to me. I had heard about this. I'm surprised you in your line of work hadn't recalled that, or
it was one of those things where I just forgot. I mean, when I got to looking, I'm like, oh my God, like head slap moment. It's like, oh, of course, LSD came from this stuff, So anyways,
Happens to the best of us.
apologies to everyone, but, at least we addressed it. And with having said that, I think it's time to get into the bulk of the discussion for this episode. So you better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout. And I'm telling you why. The Christmas devil is coming to beat your ass with sticks and drag you to hell. That's right. We're talking about Krampus this episode. And
Jesus Christ.
I believe before we get into the discussion about the movie, it would be good for everybody to kind of have some kind of idea about Krampus, although I'm hearing that maybe that's a little bit convoluted. So if you could possibly, LlaReyna, give us a little bit of knowledge from the beyond, that would be great.
Oh my God. I'm going to try to break it down for you. Wiki. Okay, so who is Krampus? I guess we'll start with that. He is described most often as half man, half goat. Like I said, he's Black Phillip all grown up. Let's just leave it at that. I just don't want to get rid of that right there. I want to keep that. But he's a half man, half goat figure that has most been described as a helper to Santa, which, holy shit, Santa.
Yeah.
You need to pay attention to who you hire.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Some people have even described him as Santa's cousin. So, which is a possibility. I mean, everyone has a crazy ass cousin.
That's the side of the family nobody likes to talk about.
Yeah, and Santa apparently hangs out with his cousin, so whatnot. Look at Krampus. His job ultimately is to come punish the bad children by beating them with birch sticks and dragging them to hell. Although sometimes these children return to hell, or from hell, excuse me. Sometimes in certain folklore that I've been reading, they come back. And what kind of person are you after you have come back from hell from hanging out with Krampus?
I can only imagine. Where you been at, little Johnny? Oh, Dad, I've just been to hell.
I've just been in hell, that's all. Yeah. And it's from season to season. So they got kidnapped around Christmas, and then they returned Christmas the following year.
A whole year in hell. Great.
Yeah, exactly. So, but if you didn't return from hell, which is worse, you were most likely eaten by Krampus.
Oh, okay. So he's meat's on the menu tonight, gang.
Oh my goodness. So there's a lot to go into, and I'm just going to try to condense this as best as I can, because looking into this, okay, what is the use of Krampus other than just scaring, the little children into behaving? It goes a little bit deeper. Going into history, they talked a little bit about Christmas, and I don't think I need to say, maybe I do need to say for some people, we kind of know that Christmas was a stolen holiday from the pagans. And I'm not going to go into detail about that. That's for another discussion. We don't have enough time in a month to discuss that. There's so many details following that. But back in the olden days, Krampus, yeah, Christmas was ultimately like a carnival. It was a huge celebration, and people had to have their Christmas. Now, it wasn't always called Christmas. They had different celebrations, obviously winter solstice. Yule is the pagan, basically what Christmas was prior. It's the Germanic, the Germanic paganism version of Christmas, which is basically original Christmas.
Yeah, Christmas is an odd holiday. It's like 3 or 4 different pagan holidays all combined into one. A lot of people don't even realize that. I mean, you got Roman pagan holidays wrapped into it, Nordic or Germanic, celebrations tied into it, Gaelic, pagan rituals. I mean, it runs the gamut. It lumps them all in.
Oh, it really does. And one of the ways it was described, and I was like, I could totally see this, is Christmas back in the day was kind of described like going to New Orleans during
Mardi Gras.
Christmas was big Mardi Gras. So you had people. Christmas, by the way, has been canceled so many times by so many different religions.
Yeah, it has.
Especially, we'll go back into our last discussion. Puritans. They were so afraid of Christmas. They were so afraid that they were going to enjoy the celebration of Christmas that they had it canceled. so that you just stuck to the religious end of it.
And it wasn't even just Puritans over here on the, across the pond on our side of it. I mean, there was Puritans over in England that tried canceling it. I mean...
Oh, yeah. It has been canceled so many times. Now, the reason why Christmas ultimately it has not been canceled or is no longer canceled is because you had a lot of religious sects, if you will, that were like, okay, well, if the Puritans weren't celebrating Christmas, then what are the Catholics doing? What's the Church of England doing? What are all these what are the pagans doing? So you would have people that would leave the church that they were a part of so they could go celebrate somewhere else. So other religions that had canceled Christmas, basically they were allowing Christmas so that they could keep their followers. So that's some interesting history.
I personally think, just getting into that just shortly, that I think Christmas is, especially the time of year that it occurs, I think that there's something psychologically that's needed why that holiday occurs when it does, in so many different, religious practices, or not necessarily Christmas, but just holidays in general at this time of the year. The days are shorter. I think people need a psychological boost, and I think it's just human nature that they need to celebrate to be able to just get through the dark times. And I think that anybody who tried to cancel it, basically went against human nature, and that's why they ultimately failed, trying to do that.
Oh, yeah, and you have to remember back then, too, times were a lot scarier. You couldn't just walk down the street or drive down the street to your local Walmart and pick up everything you would possibly need, for a week, let alone months at a time. You were hunting your own food. You were making your own blankets. It was a completely different time. So I know they used a lot of fear, especially for the Christmas holiday. However you want to describe the Christmas holiday, because it's not always described as Christmas. People were basically told that during the celebration, you stay indoors. And yes, it was to have a good time. It was to be around people. But they were also told that there were monsters outside, or spirits or evil beings that would get you, and you would basically never be seen again. So fear, once again, is deeply rooted in a lot of beliefs behind everything we've come to know, and Christmas is no exception.
Well, it kind of goes back to what we talked about last episode, and how, Eggers, the director of Vivitch, talked about whenever he was a child, he had those, fears about going to the woods because of witches. I mean, they all play in the morality tales. I mean, there's a reason that, you get those passed down to kind of scare people away from, because it's a dangerous time of year, or there's, with the shorter days and all that. I mean, it's kind of a morality myth that people weave into it to kind of, it's like, oh, don't go out there. There's monsters out there, to kind of, because there's real world threats that they're trying to convey in like a more, basic, form to kind of get people to do the right thing and for self-preservation, basically.
Yeah, and that really hasn't gone away entirely. I mean, nowadays we don't have to worry about going out in the snow in the middle of the night and possibly not making it home, which probably not because of monsters, let's be honest. Maybe it could be a wild animal at the worst, or maybe it's just too cold. Maybe you can't see where you're going and you don't make it home. So nowadays we've got the, as you've read, the you better not... You better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout. Also, he sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows when you've been bad or good. That is fear that is used to make sure your children are not being little assholes so that they can get the gifts that they want for Christmas.
Santa Claus is Big Brother. Let's just admit it. I mean, he's tapped in. He's watching everything you're doing. So, don't do anything that's going to, get you that lump of coal or potentially a visit from Krampus.
I'm not even going to pretend that I haven't used if I ask Santa, if you're lying to me right now, what's he going to tell me? And then I get the truth from my children. I've used it. I have no shame. It worked, okay? And what works even better now is Krampus. Maybe not for the 13-year-old. The 13-year-old will be like, whatever, let him come over. I don't care.
I would imagine... Yeah, I would imagine it would, just because, we'll get in that discussion about about the film, but that's Krampus is, he's a better deterrent than Santa is. He's actually meting out the actual punishment, where Santa's like, I might give you some coal. It's like, well, at least I can light my fire with that. That's got some use. No, Krampus is just going to drag your ass to hell. I mean, come on.
Oh my God. Krampus is actually becoming a little more popular in American culture as of recent, especially since 2015, the film that we're discussing, since that one came out. But culturally, the things that we find terrifying and absolutely like, no, we would never do that. Other countries have been doing it, and that's just normal for them. I mean, I've been to Japan before, and the stuff that they advertise, some of the toys that they have for kids are horrific. I love them as an adult. But I'm like, this is for children? And that's just how the culture is out in other areas. So it's really no surprise. And obviously, Krampus probably worked very, very well, honestly. So he is derived from pagan tradition. He's derived actually from Krampen, which means claw. That's the German word.
Okay.
So that's where they think the name Krampus came from. The earliest I've gotten people started discussing Krampus, or maybe he started coming around, was the 11th to 13th century in Bavaria. Now, he's popular in Austrian culture, Bavarian, French. I'm sure even the Spaniards, they have some kind of character that comes in on a boat from Spain that also is kind of like a Krampus representation, but is not Krampus. You know who I'm talking about?
No, but that's just the idea of this goat just, like paddling a boat across the water to, I don't know. It's just hilarious.
Oh, my God. Yeah, well, coming from another country, so that sounds like fear from another country. Like, hey, if you don't watch what you're doing, the Spaniards are going to come fuck you up, so.
Well, that myth has some very, 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 realistic world ties. I mean, given what how the Spaniards, did things, I'm surprised it's not more common. I mean, if it wasn't, I mean, they basically, if they showed up, bad stuff was happening. So.
Okay, need I point out how that is socially acceptable in other countries, but out here in America, if we're like, the Spaniards are coming, we're the racist country. So, anyways, 1250 AD seems to be the first possible depiction of Krampus. He is of Germanic paganism. He has so many different religious attributes, but we'll use the Christian symbolizations that they've used. So, for instance, the chains that Krampus wears,
yes.
They may tie him to the church, Christian church, and they're basically using him as a symbolization of Satan. So the chains represent Satan's binding to the church, or how he is bound to the church. So I found that to be interesting. Kind of pop culture. The bells ringing in It's a Wonderful Life would symbolize that an angel has gotten his wings. I think most people know that. I haven't even seen the movie, and I know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most, the penultimate scene of the movie. I mean, it's, what everybody knows. I mean, it's just a classic scene.
Well, the bells worn by Krampus are basically to warn children that he's coming. Although I don't think there's really any escape if you hear the bells of Krampus.
Oh,
but how messed up would that be? Is if you hear bells and you think that an angel's getting its wing, and it's about you are about to be dragged down to hell.
Yeah, I can just imagine a poor little American child, sitting there. It's like, oh, an angel's getting its wings. And all of a sudden Krampus shows up and, got his sticks ready. I mean, that would just, oh, man.
Yeah. So just a couple of small facts, and I'm kind of done talking about what I know about Krampus, because really the history and the lore is all over the place. I was really confused. I lost sleep. So the bells are actually, what I've read is they're to ward off evil spirits, indicating that Krampus is not necessarily an evil spirit.
That's interesting.
But holy shit, is he scary. I mean, come on. I know he's supposed to be a helper of Santa, but okay. We'll just leave that alone. And then last but not least, I found this to be fucking hilarious, is that Krampus was banned in the 1930s in Austria because he was determined to be a socialist. I'm not joking. This happened.
Does that have anything to do with his red clothing? I mean, is that what brought all this on, or?
I have no idea. I probably should have looked into that a little bit more. I heard it from multiple sources. Nobody ever went into why, but lots of jokes were made about how was he not allowed to vote during that election as well?
I mean,
did Krampus not get his voter's card?
Because the funny thing about that is that the current, at least American rendition of Santa is the most capitalistic thing you can think of because, I mean,
Exactly.
it was invented by Coke. I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but the modern version of Santa Claus is a Coca-Cola invention. Just, I mean, they added all the trimmings on there and made it what it is.
They added the brightness and the cheerfulness and the jolliness. I got a lot of history about Santa, and he actually was Santa prior to Coke. Like, they had some pretty decent depictions before Coke got involved, but they really took off with it. They took him and made him into something he would have never been as popular had Coca-Cola not gotten involved.
No, I mean, it seems like to me he was. I mean, I agree with you on that, but it seems like to me he was more of a. It's odd to say because he's supposed to be based off Saint Nicholas, which is a Christian saint,
An actual person.
But a lot of the depictions prior to Coke, I mean, he had very Nordic, like Viking-esque, like qualities about him. I mean, just like, I mean, if I've even seen pictures of him, and maybe they're not, that popular, but I mean, like, he's got like a wreath around his head that, there's obviously the leaves, but there's like depictions of him with like antlers or something, and he's wearing, I mean, just like really weird pagan vibe going on with the more traditional Santa Claus. So.
Yeah, Santa had some really cool depictions. I do want to say briefly about Santa, since we're talking about him and Krampus is the helper of Santa. So St. Nicholas, aka Santa, was an actual person that basically did good deeds back in the day. And one of the deeds that had become popular was that Santa, even though he was a saint, he had, well, before he got his sainthood, he was not a bishop. Or was he a bishop? He was someone in the, religious sect. And he had money that he didn't really use because he was busy tending to his duties. And that just wasn't his deal. Well, allegedly, the story goes that he helped this father who had 3 daughters. And back in these days, when St. Nick was alive, for your daughter to get married, you had to give a dowry. It was almost like you had to bribe somebody to marry your daughter.
Yeah.
And he didn't have the money to do it, which meant more than likely his daughters were not going to get married and probably have to resort to prostitution. Even if they got too old, even if they weren't prostitutes, nobody would want to marry them. They would just assume that they were prostitutes. So in order for these girls to get married, what St. Nick did was he put basically gold coins in a sack and threw it over the wall where this guy's home was. He found it and he was able to pay the dowry for each of his daughters to get married. So that's kind of where the first originating story of St. Nick happened. Now, he does also have a little bit of a Jesus vibe, meaning after that, after he became a saint, after he died, allegedly he came back to life, and that's how we got Santa.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that about him. That's interesting.
Yeah, I thought I'd mention that since we were starting to talk about Santa a little bit.
Yeah.
Very interesting tidbits. So I guess let's get to the meat of this film then, I guess.
Okay, we are talking this episode about Krampus, the 2015 film. Do not look at other films. I'm telling you right now, you are going to be disappointed if you go into some of these other little independent films. I hate to say it, but they are very, very bad films. And before I get into the discussion, I do have to give a rut-row warning on this one. We do have another pet being killed, thankfully off screen, but it does happen.
Did you hear the pet dying? Because you hear the noises. I don't hear any yelping is what I'm getting at.
You hear the yelping, a little bit.
It just sounds like he's angry barking.
But it sounds like it's fighting the creature.
Yeah,
we'll get into that later.
Fighting.
It's not really you. That's not what I thought. And then I wouldn't have known this unless I was listening to the commentary by the director that it even. I know, so.
Okay.
But this movie was written by Michael Dougherty, Todd Casey, and Zach Shields. It was directed by Michael Dougherty, famous especially to me for the movie Trick or Treat. I mean, he's done several
Love that
things.
film.
Yeah, I mean, he's done several films with, especially with Bryan Singer. He's done X-Men. You know, he's done a few different other like superhero movies. But Trick or Treat, I mean, that is a Halloween staple at this point. If you're not watching that on Halloween, you're doing it wrong. That just
Yeah, you don't know what you're doing because you don't know the rules.
Exactly. And Sam should pay you a visit. Principal players we have in this, we have Max Engel. That is the son and the primary lead of the movie, played by M.J. Anthony. He is the, little bit of trivia, he is the only American child actor in this film. Every other child in the film is from New Zealand. He was recommended by Jon Favreau, of all people. He had just
my God.
Exactly.
How did you get Jon Favreau on your side?
Him and Michael Dougherty are good friends, and he had just filmed a movie called Chef that where he plays I think it's like the son to Jon Favreau, and he was just like, man, you this kid's an up and comer, you've got to work with him. And Michael Dougherty's like, all right, we'll get him on, and it went from there. I mean, he's went on to star in other films with Jon Favreau, like Jungle Book, the Disney version, and actually some more Christmas movies. He's actually in Bad Moms and the Christmas sequel, Bad Moms Christmas, which is
those were good.
yeah. I like the first one, the Christmas one, but you know, it's got some funny parts to it. A little bit funny little tidbit about this actor. Michael Dougherty said he was a real ladies' man once he got him on set. Like, he was actually hitting on the fiance of one of the other writers of the movie. Like,
oh my God!
And it's just they said he's definitely one to watch out for, though. He's got a lot of charisma. So we got, speaking of that, charisma galore. We got Tom Engel, the father, played by Adam Scott, which is just, he's fantastic. I mean, in everything that he does. I mean, I've not watched a movie where I don't like Adam Scott in it. Of course, famous for Parks and Rec. I mean, he really added a lot to that show. I would argue that when him and Rob Lowe came to the show, they improved it dramatically from that point on. I mean, it was good. I mean, of course, you've got classic actors, or that come up from that. But I mean, I really think it took on its own whenever he came in. You've got him in Step Brothers. His bona fides in horror actually are that he was originally in Hellraiser Bloodlines, one of his, I think it's like second movie that he'd ever done, and Piranha 3D, which is, I'm gonna have to watch these movies now because another actor that we got coming up was in the sequel to this, and it just sounds like they're just fun movies, so I'm gonna have to watch these. Ghosted, which a lot of people might not have watched, but I thought it wasn't as good as it should have been, but it was a little show on Fox that it was kind of a combination between like supernatural and, theme and kind of like comedy, and it had potential. They just, Fox is kind of like Netflix. They just cut it off before it ever got there. So unfortunately, and of course, this is a great movie that we may or may not be discussing in the near future, called Little Evil. So he's and it's a horror comedy on Netflix. So it's he's got some bona fides in the field besides this movie. We have Sarah Engel, who's the mother, played by Toni Collette, and she definitely has some credentials when it comes to horror films. She is an Australian actress, and she was in the movie Sixth Sense, which goes back to one of our ratings. We got, I believe it's Malcolm Crowe, which is a character played by Bruce Willis. Mm-hmm. And she was in a Fright Night remake, which I don't know if you've seen that one, but that's actually a pretty decent remake. There's
not the remake. I've only seen the original.
Yeah, it's I don't know. There's elements of it that are not as good. I mean, I love the campiness of the original, and obviously, I mean, the head vampire, Chris Sarandon, he's the voice of Jack Skellington, or the talking voice at least. I mean, you got a classic film there, but the new movie does have some elements to it that I do kind of like. It's creepier at times. It's set in like this weird subdivision that's kind of being developed out in the middle of nowhere, and like I think it's in Nevada or something. It's out in the desert area. Anyways, it's got like it's way more secluded feeling somehow than
Oh
the
my God, I have seen that. I'm a liar.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, no, I did like that. They did a pretty good job.
The vampire in that is it Colin Farrell? I believe
Yep.
Colin. Yeah.
Yes, it was, and I actually liked him.
He has way more intensity and way more he's way more scary than Chris Sarandon was. Chris Sarandon had that charm to him. You could believe he was a vampire that could, steal your girlfriend from you, but Colin Farrell's like the guy that's like you don't want to mess with because he is going to kill everybody in your family. So, and she, Toni Collette played the mother to the character Anton. I'm blanking on his last name. He sadly passed away at a young age. But anyways, she was in that movie. She was recently in the movie Knives Out, which is not necessarily a horror movie, but it's kind of got like the murder mystery vibe to it. And, of course, Hereditary, which is one of the most frightening films that's came out in recent memory. And she definitely goes out of her way in that movie and really plays it up. So
I've heard, and I have not seen Hereditary yet, and I am saving it to watch it for the first time when we review that.
Yeah,
Might be a while.
Yeah, it might be a while, but it's definitely worth watching. I mean, it's one of the only movies that's actually disturbed me on a deep level. So I'll just leave it at that before we, watch it eventually. We have Beth Engel in the movie. She's the daughter, played by Stefania LaVie Owen. She is a New Zealand actress. The main movies I saw that were, I guess American based that she might have been in were Lovely Bones and Vice, which Lovely Bones kind of has a horror-ish theme to it. You have Howard in the movie. I don't think they give a last name. Maybe they do, but to the in-laws. But he plays the brother-in-law in the movie, and or it's played by David Koechner. And I love him as an actor. I mean, a comedic actor.
Yes, I do, too.
He just, I've got on here a list of the movies. I mean, he's in The Goods, which if you've never seen that, it's a very underrated comedy. It's got Jeremy Piven. It's got David Koechner, Will Ferrell. I mean, you just run the gamut of good people in the movie. They're like selling these used cars, and it's like they're all in a competition with each other. I mean, and you can just imagine, those actors like just really hamming it up. Of course, you've got him in Anchorman in the sequel. I mean, that's what he's primarily known for is Champ Kind, the sports director or, the one that covers the sports. You've got him, I can't think of the word. You've got him in the movie Waiting. He plays kind of the head of the little franchise or that they're serving, the food at. And he's, and, of course, that movie's got some big hitters like Ryan Reynolds and Luis Guzman and some like that. He's in Talladega Nights. I mean, Will Ferrell again. It goes on and on. I mean, he's in some of the bigger comedy movies. And he's actually done a fair amount of horror movies. He was in Final Destination 5. He was in Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse, which is actually a pretty decent little... I mean, I know zombies are played out, but it's a pretty decent little horror comedy movie. If you've never seen it, it's worth checking out. And... he's in the sequel to the movie that Adam Scott was in. He's in Piranha 3 Double D. So, I mean, it's...
Really?
Yeah. So, it's kind of funny that both of them played in that series. I mean...
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about him is that he was actually put into the storyboards for this film, Krampus, before he was even cast. Because the guy who's the storyboard artist actually was watching Anchorman and placed Champ Kind into the scenes... and then, into the drawings he was doing for Howard, and then they got David Koechner. So, I guess that's a little bit of a Christmas miracle there for them.
Oh, that's funny.
Rounding out the cast, you've got Linda, who's the sister-in-law, played by Allison Tolman. She, a little bit of trivia about her, she actually loves horror movies, and she was actually the first cast because she actually begged to be in this movie because she heard about it and just wanted to be in it so much. And... she is probably best known for her the first season of Fargo. I believe it was on FX. She plays a really, really good part in that. It's one of the only seasons I've seen of Fargo, but it's great. And she was in the first season of Castle Rock. I don't know if she's in the second because I've not watched the second one all the way through yet, but she was definitely in the first season of that as well, which is based upon Stephen King's series of books, kind of loosely based in that universe at least. You've got Aunt Dorothy in the movie, played by Conchata Ferrell. And a lot of people might not know that name, but they'd know her if they saw her. She was very famous in 2.5 Men. You know, got that sass to her. You know, she was always, you know, had to come back for the guys especially. She's one of her more famous movies was Mystic Pizza, you know, opposite Cher and some, you know, other big names. And as far as horror fans are concerned, she was in Edward Scissorhands and also lent a voice to Frankenweenie. So apparently she was in good graces with Tim Burton. But I say was, unfortunately, because she did pass away this year in October, sadly. So she is no longer with us, but she was very accomplished actress. She's been in a ton of things, and also a member of formerly from Appalachia. She was from West Virginia, so
Aww.
shout out to her for all that. We have Omi Engel, who's the grandmother in the movie, played by Krista Stadler. I don't know much about her because she's an Austrian-born actress, and a lot of her movies are in Austria and in that region. She was a last-minute casting, according to the director, because they got down to the wire. They didn't have anybody good to play the Omi character, and then they came across just at the last second when they didn't think they was going to get anybody. Just another Christmas miracle, as Doherty describes it. Sadler audition, she was exactly what they wanted. She was even familiar with the legend of Krampus. I mean, it was like, perfect. So
primarily spoke German, so I don't know if that's one of her languages. It seemed very natural. Yeah,
and I mean, she definitely lent the credibility to the film that you needed for that particular character, the one who is kind of the one who knows about what's going on, the one who kind of, gives the information to everybody else about, the actual, creature itself. Because, I mean, you always have that in a lot of these horror movies. You've got the one person who's kind of the one who is like, oh, let me tell you about Jason, or let me tell you about, there's always somebody, and she definitely gave that, that character, what it needed to be able to emphasize the legend of Krampus. You have, for the rest of the family members, you have Stevie, who's one of the cousins, Lolo Owen, who's actually a sister in real life to Stefania. So, and also all the rest of the kids are from New Zealand, but it's kind of, funny that, her two sisters are in the movie together. You got Jordan, who's played by Queenie Samuels. She's the other twin. I guess they're supposed to be twins. They looked about the same age. They don't, really look alike, but kind of the tomboy cousins in the movie. You got Howie Jr., who's played by Maverick Flack, and baby Chrissy, who's played by Sage Hoonfield. So that kind of rounds out the rest of the people in the cast. Getting into the movie, I just want to say, first of all, a little bit of trivia here. I love whenever Universal changes their logo at the beginning of a movie to kind of fit the theme of whatever they're doing. They do that quite a bit. I think they might have done, if I remember right, on Zombie Land, they did that to where they showed like the planet on fire, basically, or just like random chaos on the planet, if I remember, if that's one of them. But they do it in a lot of their other movies. I know that. And I just love in this one where they have like the Frozen Over logo, and it even extends over to the Legendary Pictures. It kind of gives you that, even before you get into the movie, it kind of puts you in that frame of mind that you're, dealing with this deep winter and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Doherty actually wanted to change the logo to the old 1980s ones because he intended this movie to be a throwback to Gremlins, like we talked about earlier, and kind of the banter and Poltergeist and some of those other movies where, they were a little bit more kid-like, had the puppets going on, the practical effects, and it's definitely that. I mean, we'll get into that later in the discussion, but he wanted that throwback element, and he even wanted that to extend to the logo, but they turned him down on that. So, unfortunately, he didn't get the old 1980s Universal logo, but he did get the Frozen one, so at least it, kind of, gave a little bit of that vibe before you even get into that movie. Starting out, what are your thoughts on this? Because I love the way this movie starts. It perfectly sums up what you're getting in this movie before you ever get into it, with the whole Black Friday-esque shopping spree that's going on.
Oh my God. So it's really hard to watch because it's pretty annoying. The people just treating each other like assholes. No care about, what's going on for other people, just wants to, the greed that was shown basically in this one scene. It irritated the shit out of my husband. He was like, right off the bat, I would never want to be a part of that. I personally have partaken in, I call it Dark Thursday.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right after Thanksgiving dinner, go out, start shopping. I usually don't shop on Black Friday because I've gone out on Dark Thursday. But I can tell you from out here in California, I have never experienced any shopping experience like this or what you've seen on the news, either on Black Friday or Dark Thursday. So I have missed out, but I've also gotten my goods. So,
well, I can't say that you've missed out. I don't participate in all this nonsense, but this does happen in my neck of the woods. You get to the Midwest, and all the stories you hear about people getting the cops called on them, and like the scenes in this show, like people getting tased, and I mean, they happen. I mean, and they've happened pretty close to home too. So I can't say that I've completely avoided that because they happen close enough. And it's not even on Black Friday. I mean, we sometimes have that around the release of big video game systems, like currently the PS5 and the new Xbox. I'm surprised that we haven't heard more stories about that, but I guess it's just the times that we're in. But I mean, prior to this, I remember especially with the PlayStation 3, I believe it was, PlayStation 2 was pretty bad as well. Like there was actually people fighting in lines over that. So I mean, it's not just around the holidays, but the holidays seem to make it worse for some reason. So
yeah, I've never quite understood that. Like, I get the deals. Okay, I got kids and I want to get shit half off, but I've never had to fight anybody for anything. And I guess if I ever was going to have to fight somebody, I'd be like, here, you have it. Because it's just not worth it to me,
Yeah, and I mean, I don't, some people go in for that, and I guess they don't have enough drama in their life, but that's not me. But I just love it as far as the movie goes because it just sets the tone so perfectly. It's sarcastic. You've got Bing Crosby's. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Just, I mean, a Christmas staple just playing in the background, and it's so warm and, got that nostalgia going on. And you got all these people just like tearing into each other. I mean, you got there's even scenes of, I mean, in addition to people getting tased and all that, you got like the retail workers that are all geared up and look like riot gear, ready to, deal with the public that's rushing in to take them out. I mean, it's a pretty sad but succinct, commentary on what we currently have as far as our holiday seasons. And they even throw in there just a little bit extra thing. They show the children that are like sitting in Santa's lap and just crying. And I mean, that fits perfectly too, because I mean, how many kids get sat in Santa's lap and you got this creepy guy that you've never seen before and you just start bawling? I mean, did you have any problems like that with your kids whenever they were younger, or?
Yeah, I got a couple photos. I actually have one really good one of my tub of lard son laughing his ass off, and my daughter looks like she is not impressed with what's going on. If anything, she looks like, look, we've all seen Firestarter, okay? Or is that the name of that movie with Drew Barrymore?
Yeah, that's it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, if she could start a fire with her eyes, she would have. It's a really good photo.
And then of course, before we get out of the scene, we've got, we see our leads, finally at the tail end of it. We've got Max up on stage. Looks like they're doing some kind of retelling of the Nativity, and he's in like, one of the I don't know what character he's supposed to be playing, but dressed like, one of the wise men or something like that, just belting another kid, just like punching him, and it's all in slow motion, and like, everybody's like, just like, what the hell's going on here? It's just like I said, it's the perfect way to set up the movie. A little bit of trivia about this though. This whole scene, they couldn't get the rights or the ability to film it in the U.S. for whatever reason, and I guess I can understand why. No big box store in the U.S. would allow them to use their stores. They just didn't want that association with what's going on in this, even though it's the truth of what's really going on. So they were filming most of the rest of the stuff in New Zealand anyways, because they worked with Weta, which, of course, Lord of the Rings is their most famous, that and Hobbit, big time effects company. But they moved it to New Zealand and filmed it there. And the funny thing about that is they had to really, really, really stretch to find enough people of, I guess you want to call it ethnic diversity on the island to be, or country, I guess, at large, to be able to make it look like it might be in the U.S. Because I guess there was just not a lot of people there that wouldn't, the traditional Kiwis that you think of. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah. I've heard about that, about New Zealand. Like they, especially the type of people they use for modeling, they have a brand that they stick with. And when I say a brand, I mean a type of person, and they really don't go outside of that box. So I could see that being a problem in filming when you need people of different ethnic backgrounds.
Yeah, and they wanted to be, to make it look like it was an American melting pot, and they said that was one of the hardest things. They said nothing else about the scene was about filming it was really that hard. It's just they had to spend forever just combing the depths of the entire country just to be able to find enough people to make it look semi,
Well, let's be honest, what they have in New Zealand, they have white people or they have people that look Samoan.
Exactly. So, I mean, that... but the movie moves on from this point. We cut to a scene of I believe it's a 1951 version of A Christmas Carol, and we focus on that for a second as it's playing in I believe it's the kitchen area of the home. And that was a very deliberate scene by the director. He wanted it to be foreshadowing for the overall theme of the movie. It's
which is horror.
Horror, but also the theme of where you take somebody who has lost their Christmas spirit and they have to be scared to fucking death to get it back, basically, which is, I mean, that's ultimately what's going on in both A Christmas Carol and in this movie. And honestly, in a few other Christmas films, when you get right down to it, I mean, Home Alone takes that same concept. I mean, you got, Kevin does the same thing. He loses his spirit. He has to, he gets attacked by, Marv and Harry, and, it takes that adversity to be able to, come back into the spirit and realize what he lost. So, I mean, it's kind of a revolving theme. I think that all, dates back to Dickens' Tale, which is, shows how much, of a good story it really is at heart.
Oh, yeah. It holds up very well.
And and there's just so many variations that you can do with it, and it still works, and you can still modernize it. So, basically the family at this point is shown dealing with the aftermath of Max's outburst. Everybody's kind of doing their own thing. Sarah, the mother, is hanging pictures, which in the movie, I wish they would have left the deleted scene. In the movie, they show just a picture of her hanging up the most recent one, and of course, right before she's done with it, she realizes the creepy Santa Claus is giving the side eye to her daughter, which is creepy as hell considering her daughter's, not of age, but just kind of fits the theme of how degenerated Christmas is at this point, at least for the family. But if you watch the deleted scenes, there's actually 4 different. She goes back and reviews all 4 photo or pictures she's got on the walls, and it starts out, they're just a very iconic, just happy family on the leftmost side, the oldest picture, and each successive picture just, you can see more just like either boredom, just disengagement, or just general hostility in the family's face with each successive picture leading down to that last one. So I felt like that
the jolly spirit just fades over time.
Yeah, and I think it's perfect, and I don't know why they cut it, but I mean, I think, but at least the one they left in the movie just kind of shows where they're at. I mean, it's just the holiday is degenerated to where it lacks all the meaning that it should have. You have Omi in the kitchen making cookies with Max, and here's where we kind of get a little bit more foreshadowing into the movie too. She's, brings up the letter about Santa and, trying to gauge where he's at with his Christmas spirit, knowing she knows in her heart. I mean, you can tell from the scene that he's the only one that's holding the Christmas spirit for the rest of the family. She knows that.
Yeah, he's the last hope.
Yeah, he's the last one keeping, the terror at bay that will come later. And when Max turns around and asks her if she believes in Santa, she has this dark hesitation about her, and that's one of the more foreshadowing moments of the film or whatever, because she knows something else darker is going on, but you can see it in her face. She's pained when he asks her that. So you've got a little bit more of the family shown. Tom takes a phone call from work, which you can see that Sarah's disappointed with him. that he won't even take off for the holidays from his job. I mean, there's kind of this hint that I don't know that I don't feel like they show this in the movie, but Doherty talks about in the commentary that like Tom, and I think maybe even Adam Scott mentioned this in like some of his interviews, that Tom is one of those people who is always gone most of the time on Christmas or around Christmas time, like on flights and stuff. So for him to even be home is a big thing, but he still, even though he's home, he won't let work go away. And I don't know, to me, that kind of even plays back into A Christmas Carol, because it's almost like with Scrooge, you know, like Scrooge sees no point in taking off for Christmas. It's another day, you know, another way to earn $1, and it's kind of what Tom's doing. I mean, he won't even disengage and, you know, spend time with his family. He's still got business to do. So the rest of the family hears the very upsetting news that the in-laws and the cousins are coming, and they all deal with it in their different way. You know, Sarah, it's Sarah's family, and, you know, the rest of them, you can tell they just can't stand any of them. They all go to their different parts of the home, and kind of you see the separation in the family. Beth's seen on there chatting with her boyfriend online, and Tom's in there taking his phone call, and everybody else is just kind of separated. And then you hear this loud rumbling or whatever, and that shakes the house, and everybody knows exactly what's coming up at this point. It's the thing that they've been most worried about anyways when it comes to dealing with the holidays, which is, I think, fair. I mean, you know, most families, I mean, there's always that one segment. It's like, oh no, don't tell me they're coming. You know, it's like, you know, everybody's got that. You know, it's. I mean, I feel like it's very realistic in its depiction. But the basic takeaway at this point in the film is just, you see how separated the family is. They're not together. They're off doing their own things. They're not engaged with one another whatsoever. And it's only made worse when the in-laws come in, because you've got, when they come in, they are diametrically opposed to the family that we're introduced to. I mean, we Tom and Sarah and and Max and Beth and all of them, they're, you know, white collar family, more well-to-do. You can tell by what, you know, how their house is decorated and kind of how they are. And then you got this family coming in, and they're as blue collar as can be. I mean, you know, right down, I mean, to the, you know, conservative, Republican-esque, you know, nature that they have. You know, they're the gun owners are the ones that more, I guess, redneck, if you want to think of them in that way. And they're just, they do not get along with each other. I mean, it plays into the next few scenes whenever they're at the dinner table and they're like discussing politics and stuff, which is something you should really not do with family if you don't get along with them to begin with. But, you know, but I mean, it's night and day. And what makes it worse for Sarah is the fact that Bombshell, Aunt Dorothy's being brought in too, and she doesn't even appreciate this little tidbit information, because of all things, she was ready to deal with her sister and her family, but she wasn't ready to deal with Aunt Dorothy on top of it. So
that kind of reminds me of Aunt Edna from National Lampoon's Vacation, how Cousin Eddie and and his wife just kind of dumped Aunt Edna off.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Does she die in that movie? Like, yeah, okay.
She sure does.
But speaking of that, I mean, I get a very National Lampoon's vibe from this scene, like especially with the vehicle pulling up and rumbling and all that. It almost reminds me of like Cousin Eddie's, like, you know, the mobile home.
Cousin
and then,
Eddie vibe.
Of course, the scene later, the dog's like, you know, eating from under the table, which you can tell just annoys Sarah to no end. It's like, why are you letting this dog eat off my floor? I have to. And then one of the people makes the comment, I think it's even her sister. It's like, well, you know, Aunt Sarah has to keep everything sparkling clean because she don't, you know, it's like, it's just, I mean, the family does not care for each other at this moment in the movie. I mean, not at all. There's a big scene, or they're part of the scene where they're fighting. This is a little bit of trivia over the fact that I think Sarah mentions that she's like, well, you would appreciate it if I would have fixed hot dogs with macaroni and cheese. And they were like, yeah, actually we would have, compared to this crap you know that we can't even pronounce.
Oh my God.
And the trivia about that is that the director, Michael Doherty, said that was one of his favorite meals growing up as a kid, even though he was a little bit more white collar. He said they still, you know, he's like, hot dogs and macaroni and cheese. He said even to this day he still loves it. He said he just had to throw that in there as like a little jibe or whatever, you know, to kind of stir things up. But But all this culminates in basically the scene between Max getting in yet another fight, this time with his, twin cousins. They're making fun of him over the fact that he's got this, letter made out to Santa. It's like, what are you, still a baby? You're writing to Santa Claus. Who believes in this crap? They tell him this horrible story about how Santa Claus crashes into the mountains and has to survive by feeding off the rest of the reindeer, and make this horrible little pun about 8 tiny reindeer, get it? 8, ATE, that sort of thing. It's like, oh my God, and he just can't take it anymore, and he gets in an argument with them. He gets sent upstairs, and that's when the bad thing happens. That's whenever Max finally, he's hesitating. He's got the last little flicker of his holiday spirit. You can see it in his eyes, and he's just like, screw it, I'm done. Nobody else cares about this. I'm not going to either. And instead of he's in the process of putting it back in the envelope, and he just takes it back out, takes it to the window, rips it up, and throws it into the sky. And that's whenever you see, because
and that's when you know it's over.
The pieces just magically get sucked up into the heavens, basically, and you got this like ominous music playing as it does, which I thought was kind of interesting, because it kind of reminded me too. This is another throwback to another film. It reminded me a little bit of Home Alone, where Kevin makes the wish, to his mother. He's like, well, I wished I could be alone or whatever. And then that's whenever, the storm comes in shortly thereafter, to cause all the mayhem in that movie. It's kind of got that vibe to it.
Oh my God, it does.
This is the part of the movie where Doherty said it's a pure holiday movie. At this point, if past the point where the letter flies up in the sky, if it would have continued on, you could have made just a regular holiday movie out of it. I mean, it just has the family elements, a little bit of sniping comedy back and forth. But that's not what we got. We've got a horror movie. So this is the part of the movie where it branches off and it actually becomes the horror movie it was meant to be.
In the best way. And it takes off.
Yeah, it really takes off. It's in the original script he had for this movie, he had it being more of a horror film right from the start. But that was part of the problem, because in his original script, he had Krampus like right from the start, just going through town, picking off people left and right, which, that could have been a decent movie. It could have, but he didn't.
We would have enjoyed it.
Yeah, horror fans would have liked it, but the reason he didn't go with that was because when he got to a point where he just didn't feel like that was enough of a movie to really focus on. So, and he wanted another angle to it, and that's whenever one of his co-writers came up with the idea. It's like, well, listen, I don't want to shit on Christmas. That's literally what he says in the commentary. He's like, I did not want to shit on Christmas. He said, I love the holiday. He's like, why don't we lean into the family? And that's whenever the spark came for Doherty and the other writer. It's like, man, that's what we needed. That was the one thing that needed to break this script. Let's make it a family movie first and then put the horror elements in. And that's where we got the movie that we got. So this whole first...
And also, if you're paying attention to details, it is implied that Krampus went through this town and wiped it out. You got the snowmen?
Yes.
You got them going through the empty homes where you can clearly see Krampus has visited.
Yes.
So...
And so he gets the movie he wants later on, but I think that it was smart whenever they decided to make it. And especially to spend all this time. This is a good chunk of the movie at the beginning where we're not dealing with anything Krampus related. It's just, comedy between some comedic snipes against each other by very talented comedic actors and actresses. And it's just played as like a straight holiday movie, but I think that's great because you get to know the family before the horror begins, so you know what you're dealing with. It gives them time to establish, what they want to do before they kick into that part.
And it's kind of important for you to feel the emotion when it gets to a boiling point.
Yeah, and you need exactly, and you need to know why it means so much later. And we'll get into that, why whenever the bad stuff starts happening, that when they come together, you need that previous, family time to be able to realize how far apart they were, and how Krampus is really, despite every bad thing he's doing, is actually doing something great for the family, because he's actually bringing them together the way they were meant to be, but they couldn't because of their own, just idiotic problems, basically. So... another little thing that I never noticed until Doherty, mentioned it, and it's really cool, is that whole color tone of the movie changes at this point. Right after the letter flies up into the sky, you go from these warm, very bright holiday tones to this very cold bluish tone to the rest of the film. and it doesn't
the whole
come
movie
back.
looks cold.
Yeah, and you don't get that warmth back at all until the final scene. So it's very interesting. It's the act break in the movie where we go into the second act and the horror begins. But getting into that, overnight a blizzard happens. Again, kind of like Home Alone, there's a blizzard overnight out of nowhere and causes the mayhem that ensues. There's just a massive amount of snow dropped. I mean, the work they did to create these effects, considering it was all done on a sound stage, it's amazing because it looked cold. I mean, I loved what they did with the snow in this movie. I mean, it really, really added to the atmosphere, I thought.
Yeah.
Basically, the whole suburb that they're in is this howling tundra. I mean, they've got all these weird snowmen. Max sees through the window. He even mentions, he's like, "Hey, where'd these come from?" Very reminiscent of the scarecrows in the yard of the couple that at the beginning of Trick or Treat. They got all these scarecrows up. It's got that vibe to it, bringing that back from that movie. This is the point in the movie where the DHL driver knocks or rings the bell. They come to the door and they're like, "Where's that extra bag from?" And he's like, "I don't know, maybe the guys in brown delivered that one," and that's and
wow.
and that's a setup for the later in the movie when the gifts from Krampus come to life. That's the foreshadowing or the setup for that part of the movie. Of course, at this point, we have Beth. She's concerned. She can't contact her boyfriend. Something's wrong. He's not responding back to her. And nobody really suspects anything at this point. So, Sarah's like, "Fine, you can go out. Just try to be back within an hour. This is crazy, the weather we've got."
Did you see the storm that was outside? They let her go walk in that?
I saw that, and I'm like, this right here shows how far they've fallen as a family, because I don't care how worried she was about her boyfriend. I would have said, "No, if you're going to go, I'll drive you over there." I would not let even if it's just a few houses away, I would not let her walk out in that. That is ridiculous.
Oh my God. You know what my husband said? Because I was like, "That's insane. I would never." He's like, "Well, you don't live in an area like that." And I'm like, "Goddamn Skippy, I don't. But if I did, I would not let my daughter go walk in that."
Well, I mean, granted, we don't get a lot of snow here in Appalachia either. So, I mean, but I wouldn't. I mean, there's just no way. I mean, anything looked like that, growing up, my family they were like, "No, you're not going out in that. What do you think? You're crazy."
She couldn't even see, more than 7 feet in front of her?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what I was going to get into in this next little part. When she goes out, I mean, this to me is the best part of the movie. This is where they dial up the horror to an 11. And I mean, it's so creepy outside. I mean, you got the snowmen, of course, and they're adding to it, but just the howling wind, the how dark it is outside. I mean, the color tone they've added, the deep snow that they made, which is funny because it's an interesting combination of different things they used to make that snow. They had regular foam tore up. They had a lot of it that they waded through was torn up diapers, which is really interesting.
That's expensive snow.
Yeah, and not only that, but they said that the deep snow would actually pull you under to a certain degree, so they couldn't wear shoes when they were filming those scenes where they were wading through the really, really thick stuff. So,
oh my God.
Because if you did, you'd lose your shoe when you came back out. That's how thick.
Oh my God.
But and then of course for the stuff that covered them on their heads, they used just basically bubbles, that you get foam type bubbles, wet, kind of thing to kind of give that wet snow appearance. So I mean, that scene is just, I mean, it really amps up the horror. I mean, it's so creepy when she goes outside and she's going through all this. And then shortly thereafter, we get our first sign of Krampus. Beth hears this weird sound off in the distance, looks over to one of the houses, and lo and behold, you've got big creepy Krampus just, standing on one of the rooftops, kind of staring at her, from the shadows. And very good design on this creature in this movie. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know how Krampus is personified in a lot of other things, but especially when we get in later, the mask and everything else they add to him, this to me is the best version of Krampus that I think I could ever see.
Yeah.
You got the horns. I mean, you got the huge hooves. I mean, he's massive. They actually said that the rig for this thing was almost 8 foot whenever it was extended to its full height, even though most of the movie it's hunched over.
Whoa.
They put some. Yeah, and the guy who was in it was only 5'8", so.
Oh my God.
And he couldn't see, this is another little bit of trivia, he couldn't see in the rig for this thing. He actually had to have a camera set up inside that allowed him to see visually what he was looking at outside. So he said he had sensory deprivation in the suit. Like he basically was, it was like he was in some kind of weird, I don't know, virtual reality unit whenever, I mean, what it felt like, I mean, it's what, I mean, just the way he described it is what it seemed like to me. Like he had no sensations, you know, he couldn't touch anything because those, what, they had these like extensions added on to give him those long fingers and all that. So he couldn't touch anything. He was totally enclosed in the suit, couldn't see anything other than the little camera that was showing him what was going in front of him. I can't even imagine what it'd been like to be in that thing. It weighed 70 pounds, by the way.
Oh my God.
So when you see Krampus and it looks like he's, you know, got a lot of, you know, there's a lot of bulk to him, and he's got, I mean, just when you see him walking, you can sense this, that there's just a lot of weight to the character. It's really there. I mean, the actor who played him even said that. He's like, yeah, it's, I think he said 35 kilograms, about 70 pounds. He said it was very, very heavy to work around in. And it was all practical. The only scenes they filmed with Krampus that were digital was the scenes where he's jumping from rooftop to rooftop.
Well, yeah.
Funny thing is that the houses themselves were digital in the scene where he's standing there. Like they filmed, I mean, because they had practical houses, but it was all a soundstage, and they used like force perception to be able to get the, because they had these houses like 1/3 the size of what they would normally be. So they were very small houses, but the way they were set up in the background and the way they did the digital work around them, that's actually how they made them look like real houses. Like,
yeah, it was like an illusion. So they did a good job.
Yeah, which harkens back to something in Elf, because they did something similar in the scenes where Will Ferrell was interacting with the elves. I mean, it was the same kind of setup. They had the elves in the background, Will Ferrell in the foreground, made him look like he was a lot larger, so they kind of played up the, you know, that sort of thing, you know, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see. Beth is chased by Krampus at this point. I mean, he's jumping from rooftop to rooftop. You got that creepy howling in the distance. I mean, that really adds to the scene. I mean, that howling just is crazy. And which is something that Doherty comments on. He said he really use sound as the focus for the team to be able to amp up the horror in the movie, you know, in addition to the other things in it, because we'll get into this later, but they scaled back the horror when it came to the actual creatures, because that was intentional, because they wanted this to be a dark fairy tale for kids, so they didn't want it too scary, so they allowed the sounds to add to the ambiance of the horror and, you know, some of the images, but they wanted the actual way that the creatures interacted to be more whimsical and, you know, more comedic, if you will. So I mean,
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so they wanted to, they put it out there, but they pulled their punches, basically. Because honestly, with the way this scene was filmed and the way that everything looked and the sound and everything, if they went straight horror, this movie would be our rating system would be a Beetlejuice. It would be a Ghost for the most. I mean, this whole lead up scene here with Beth, I mean, is amped up to, you know, 11. It's you know, pure horror. And if they would have went that way for the rest of the movie, this would have been a top of the line, scare you out of your pants horror movie. But they pulled punches later to bring it back in line so they can make more of a, you know, like I said, a kids film. So, but then you have Beth, you know, being chased. She comes upon the DHL driver. He's got this horrible, scared, you know, rictus death mask or whatever on his face. He's been frozen to death in place or whatever, showing you how, and possibly scared. I mean, he probably died of a heart attack too, whatever he saw, because that's kind of the image
he was frozen in fear, literally.
Literally. And she's freaked out by this. She has nowhere else to go, so of course she hides under his vehicle, and that's when we get our first sighting of Krampus's hooves as they clomp down, right, you know, and then you get that weight effect again in front of the vehicle. And he slowly, you know, walks around the vehicle, amping up the tension. You know, is he going to find her? I mean, she's just laying there. Of course, he has to be hearing her. I mean, he made it this far, you know, chasing her. And he's gone. He's just gone. But in his place is a little Jack-in-the-Box. And that's where we kind of get the hint. I don't know if you saw this. You only catch it for a split second, but it is one of those creatures that appears later in the movie because it's got the same face. Like
I figured it out later in the film.
It's got the same face, because I only noticed this recently rewatching this for this, you know, review, and you see it. It's got that clown mask as it pops out of the thing, but, you know, it cuts away as soon as it shows it. You hear Beth screaming, and she's gone. she's gone for the rest of the movie until the final end scene. A little bit of trivia for this part, and this ties back to a film that we've previously covered, is that this was the breath effects in this movie were digital, but tying back to The Exorcist, they actually filmed the actors in a freezer and caught their actual breath digitally and then put it back in the movie after the fact. So even though the breaths were digital, they were also practical.
Fucking shit.
Which is really cool. So this one went a little bit longer than we expected it to, but of course with a movie like this, it's kind of hard to break it down in a shorter amount of time. Just there's so much going on. So this will be a two-parter, and you can catch us next week for the second half of this, where we actually break down and really discuss the bulk of this movie. LaReyna, peace be with you.
And with your spirit.